Hey y'all. Today I thought I'd just do a quick little, kind of like a little mini tour. We're waiting on the Hurricane Helene to come through, and we're supposed to get a lot of flooding off of it, which is so strange since we're in, North Alabama on a mountain. But anyways, I say a little prayer for all the people who's going to be affected in Florida because the part of Florida that it's coming through is actually a part that we like to go to vacation, and they're expecting it to be pretty bad down there. But I thought I'd do a quick little tour before that comes through because I don't know what my landscape is going to look like afterwards. Um, so we'll just start with right here. I wanted to show some of the things that are blooming and looking really pretty, like this knockout rose. It's really got a lot of blooms on it today. Some things are going to look not so great because we have been in a really bad drought. And some things are, still looking pretty good, but I'm going to show the good and the bad. Um, this is one of my favorite roses as in the knockout line rose group because the color of it is so pretty. The baby pink, I just love it, and right now it's really flushed out, but I know after this rain and wind we're supposed to get, it's probably not going to have any blooms on it by tomorrow. And also, I will have to put the name of this one on the screen because my daddy rooted this clematis out of his yard a few years ago before he passed away, and it's blooming again. It blooms off of the new growth. Maybe it blooms off the old growth too. I'm not sure, but it's actually ran all up the pool deck. And I had taken some cuttings off of this. I don't know, about a month ago, and it's put on new growth, and now it's starting to rebloom. It's really pretty. Speaking of propagations, I'm fixing to do a series of propagation videos for different things in your, in your landscape. Or if maybe you want to take a cutting from somebody else's landscape. But this is a really pretty clematis. And of course the petunias, the proven winners petunias, there's not really a whole lot you can say about those. They're vigorous and they're just so pretty. But I will say this. I believe, personally for me, I prefer to plant them in the landscape. While I do have, a few in pots, and they look very pretty that way. And if you're able to keep up the watering, when you have them in, flower pots, then, that's great. But if you plant them in the landscape, you see how they spread out, and you don't have to water them the way you do if they're in a flower pot. I very seldom watered these this whole summer, and I only fertilized them just a few times throughout the whole growing season. But the ones that are in the pots are really starting to die back now because in my landscape nothing is on drip. So if we're having a drought, then I'm having to hand water everything. And so the things that are in pots, it's just hard to keep enough water in them if you don't have drip run to them. If that's not something that you think you're going to be able to keep up on, the watering, if you don't have drip run to your pots, then I would recommend just planting them directly in the ground. It's so much easier, and you see how they've spread out. I just think it's so pretty. And of course we have the dahlias here. Like I said, some I've started from seed. I've said this in other videos. Some I started from seed, some I bought as tubers. And in my zone, they do come back. Or at least all the ones I have planted here. this fall, once we start cooling down, it's still pretty hot here. We've been in the 90s all week. So once it starts cooling down here, I plan on moving these dahlias over to my garden shed. And so I'm going to landscape around it this fall. And so these are one of the things I'm planning to move. But they do look really pretty here. But I want to plant other things in this area. I really didn't expect all of the dahlias to come back every year. This is the second or third year that they've come back. And they're spreading. They're spreading. So I'm going to dig them up and probably divide them and then, move them to the garden shed or the garden shed area as I'm starting to landscape out that way. And you can see this mandevilla vine it's running up. It's at the top of the trellis now. While it's not thick, it is beautiful. It's really blowing its little head off today, actually. This is actually one that I bought last year, and it's not hardy in my area, but I did overwinter it. I just dug it up and cut it back to maybe a foot tall, and just kept it in the house in front of a window and just watered it occasionally. I let it stay mostly dry during the wintertime. And then in the early spring, I gave it more light, gave it more water, fertilized it, and it's taken off, and it's really pretty. Very simple to overwinter if you have room to do that with. I have since added mulch since I did my last video working in this area. You can see the mulch makes it look so much neat and tidier than it did in some of the previous videos. Again, planting the petunias directly in the landscape, is just so much easier. This, I've treated the same way the ones I just showed. Very, very simple and so much easier to grow this way. Also, if you watched the video on the Lady Banks rose that I propagated, this will be a quick little update on it. This is it. I planted it in the ground, and it's already starting to vine. It's only been here maybe a week, and it's already starting to run up the trellis. So I will continue to train it up the trellis. But, yeah, it was a propagation from, a cutting that I took off of one I bought for a friend. And it's doing really good so far. I get more dahlias. More that, I started from seed here in the front. So I'll have quite a few dahlias to move. But now you can see, like from a distance, this petunia doesn't look too bad. But as you get closer and closer to it, it's starting to look rough. It's time for it to be cut back or, pulled out and replaced with something else. But I'm going to wait till after this storm's over before I do any of that kind of stuff. And once I cut it back, you will be able to see there is a rudbeckia underneath it. It completely covered it the last few weeks, and excuse me. And so I'm sure the rudbeckia will be proud to get some more sunlight. And look at the hydrangea. It has put on a new flower, and it's putting another one on the top. While most of the other flowers, have turned brown for the most part, because that's what happens here in our climate. But this one, I think, because it has bloomed a lot later, look, it has a lot of the pink on it. It's so pretty. So I'm thinking that if you're in a warmer zone, if you cut some of it back in early summer, I know you'll sacrifice a few of the blooms, but you will have new blooms, really pretty blooms, way on over in the fall. That's what I'm thinking, and I think I'm going to try that next year. It would be nice to have blooms in the fall and, not all of them be brown. The coneflowers are doing pretty good. These are all new ones that I've planted this year except for one. And you can see it's starting to has a little bitty yellow bloom at the very bottom. That one is actually from last year. And if you've never grown the black-eyed Susan vines, they're so pretty. This one's the white one. There's 3 different colors as far as I know. There's the yellow, the white, and kind of like a peachy color. I've grown all 3. And they self-seed. I only planted them one year. I think 3 years ago, 3 summers ago, I planted these. And not here. I planted them in a different area. But the seeds have just kind of got strewn, in different areas, and maybe by the birds or whatever. I will show you in a minute where I actually did plant them. And then that's the only time I had to plant them. I bought the seed from Park Seed. And they reseed every year. They come back and well, that's the only white one that I have right now that came back. I have a whole bunch of the yellow ones. But you can see, everything's doing okay. The Caryopteris over there, of course, is covered with bees. If you've never grown Caryopteris, I would highly recommend doing that if you're trying to support pollinators. Because the bees and butterflies absolutely love the Caryopteris. I have a video coming out where I've propagated that one too, if I've not already released it before this video gets released. This little hydrangea looks rough, but I think it's going to be fine. I planted it in early summer, which is not really the best time to plant any kind of bush in the south. But I think it's going to be fine. It actually has a tiny little flower on the top, which is kind of funny. But it's deciduous in my area, so all this is going to fall off, and I think next year it'll look really pretty. It's the Limelight Prime, so one of the newer varieties of hydrangeas. And this is the area that I call the tunnel area. And I've not mulched it yet because I'm not done planting. I'm not sure exactly what I want to. I've got a few things I want to plant here, but I've got to dig it up and move it from other areas. And again, I'm waiting for the weather to cool down before I do any of that kind of stuff. But this rose is so pretty. I'll have to put it up on the screen. I bought it years ago at Walmart, and it struggled for quite a few years after we moved here because I moved it from our other property. But it's actually doing pretty good now. This is the best it's looked in probably 4 or 5 years. I mean, I was on the verge of pulling this one out of my garden. And I'm so thankful that I didn't, because this is one of my favorite roses. You can see the sage. And you can see this is the yellow black-eyed Susan. It's running everywhere, the black-eyed Susan vine, I mean. It's wrapped around my sage that I started from seed early this spring. Which, I'm not going to let it do that next year. vine everywhere, but I do think it's pretty vining up the trellis or the tunnel with the hardy kiwi vine. You know, having all those little pops of yellow flowers is so pretty, especially this time of year when a lot of the things is, you know, not looking so great. This is a type of salvia also that I started from seed, and you can see there's a big bee on it right now. They also love this. It's this one is annual in my zone, but I started it. I bought the seed, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago from Swallowtail Gardens, I think is the site. And it's so pretty. But this is a tall variety of salvia, so you know, if you're looking for something short, this one might not be for you, but because I think last year it actually got a lot taller than it has this time. Last year I think it got maybe 4.5 foot tall, so pretty, and it was a lot bushier. But either way, it's still very pretty, and the bees and all the pollinators love it. A lot of the things have started losing its leaves. This is a crepe myrtle. But yeah, you can see, and look at this. This is a red knockout rose, and the black-eyed Susan vine has taken it over. And so this is something that I'm not going to let happen next year. But all of these black-eyed Susan vines came up from seeds that fell off last year. And so, you know, if you have it where it's not going to run all over, I mean, it's easy to pull up. You can see them when they first pop up. And they're not invasive or, you know, crazy kind of germination with them. But, you know, they are pretty prolific when it comes to the self-seeding part. This pot was really pretty earlier, a few weeks ago. The bubblegum petunia has finally died in this pot, but it's okay. It has peppermint, which is an herb, and I actually have a lot of the herbs growing around the greenhouse. But this one's very pretty in a pot. You definitely don't want to let it do what it's doing right now, though. Once it hits the ground, you want to go ahead and, you know, cut the bottom off, because while it will promote bushiness, it'll make it, you know, thicker as it goes up toward the pot. It also, if you let it on, you know, if you let it hit the ground, it's going to start running, and everywhere it hits the ground, it's going to root. And so if you don't want this running everywhere, you want to make sure you keep it cut off the ground. But it's very pretty in a pot. The verbena has started to bloom again. And so has I think it's called Nephofia. And then we have the vermillionaire that's back behind it, which is another plant that the hummingbirds absolutely love. It could benefit from being cut back. I've also taken some propagations off of that one. I would like to see if I can overwinter it this year. But the verbena has started blooming. I had a little bit of a problem with it earlier. I'm not sure if it was spider mites, because like I said, we've been in a drought. And I have also had to deal with budworms this year on some of the petunias and some of the verbena, which is, you know, I think last year was the first time I've ever had to deal with budworms in my area. But nevertheless, I used Captain Jack's, and it works great for the budworms, and it also is, you know, works pretty good for spider mites too. But they're blooming again. That's the amethyst And then we have the pink. I think it's called Sparkling Rose, maybe. I'll have to, if that's not right, I'll try to put it up on the screen. And then we also have the Blow My Mind Evolvulus. That plant is amazing. It's so drought tolerant. In fact, I was overwatering it in the spring when I first planted it, and I thought it was going to not make it. It was struggling. So I quit watering it. No fertilizer, no water, none of that stuff. And it's took off, and it's very pretty now. I have another one. Right here. Well, actually, I have 3 more here. They're so pretty. And they are blue. They're not purple. I know a lot of the plants that say they're blue are purple. But this one is actually blue, and it's, like I said, it's kind of a maintenance-free plant. You just kind of plant it and don't mess with it. And who doesn't like those kind of plants? And this right here is a Mini Vista Yellow. It's a Supertunia. I think it's a Supertunia Vista. And it's actually a propagation that I took because I had bought one and I thought that it was not going to make it. It had budworms, and I think it had something else going on with it too when I purchased it. I mean, I didn't know it until I got it, planted, and after about a week, it looked like it was almost dead. So I took a couple cuttings and propagated it, and so this is the propagation from it. And I've not fertilized this one or anything, so had I have done that over the last couple of weeks, it would be twice the size it is now. And this is a sedum. It's more of a ground cover type sedum. And it's actually cuttings that I took off of the one that I'm fixing to show you. I bought one, but I needed it on both sides of this walkway. And so I just took some cuttings. Also have that in a video. So this is like a little update on that in this little tour, because you can see that, all the cuttings are still alive. They're doing great. In fact, they look like they're growing. And I'll show you the plant I took the cuttings off of. This one right here. And so next year, the other one will be just as big and pretty as this one is. And like I said, I only bought one plant. And so if when you're buying plants, because they're so expensive now, if you don't want to spend the money to buy multiple plants, you can take cuttings. In fact, that's what I did with the Blow My Mind Evolvulus. While I've got 4 plants here, 3 here and 1 on the other side. I only bought 1 plant. And I took several cuttings, and then I planted the big plant. It wasn't big. It was a small plant, too. And I rooted the other 3 cuttings and, spread it around. So, I like to do that with a lot of the plants that I purchase. The Gara, while it's beautiful, and it does have a very pretty flower, it is pretty big for this spot. And so this one might get moved before next spring. I'm gonna kind of think on it a little while, and then I'll decide. I have I actually have a white one and then a dark pink one, and they're a different variety, and they don't get as big as this one. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to think on whether I want to leave this one or move it, but it is very pretty. And the blanket flower, or Gaillardia, it's doing really good. It could use some deadheading. if you deadhead it, you'll have a lot more blooms. You don't have to deadhead it. It just makes it look a little better if you do. Uh, it could benefit if the Gara wasn't there, because it does shade it a good bit part of the day. The salvia, this I started from seed 2 or 3 years ago, and I bought the seed from Baker Creek, and it's a perennial salvia, and I love it. I think it's so pretty. It does get, I want to say, roughly about 3 foot tall. It's not, it's not really big like the pink one or the coral pink that I showed a while ago. But it is very pretty, and the pollinators love it too. And you can collect seed off of this one, if you want to, and start more next year. And this is lantana, and you can see there's a monarch on it. I've had lots of monarchs this whole summer. I planted some butterfly weed, the tuberous butterfly weed, I think 2 years ago. And after that first year, maybe it was 3 years ago, after that first year, I know last summer I had lots of monarchs, but this summer I've had probably twice as many monarchs, along with the swallowtails, the black ones, the yellow ones. My yard has literally been covered with butterflies all summer long, and we've thoroughly enjoyed seeing that. And this is, if you've never grown lemongrass from seed, it's so easy to do. And it's probably 4.5 foot tall now, so it gets pretty good size. But it's pretty because in the fall you can see, it starts to turn red. It gets a lot, it'll get a lot of those red burgundy leaves on it over the next few weeks before we get our first, frost. But it's a really good one to start from seed if you've not done it and you like grasses. And but it's not a perennial. I do either. I have to start it from seed every year if I want to keep it. And I have some yarrow here that is starting to bloom again. I had cut it back because it had bloomed. I have got pink. I've got a light pink, a dark pink, and white right here. They just kind of encircle the front of this grass, which I know the name of it, but it's completely left my mind, so I'll have to put it on the screen. It is a perennial grass. But the yarrow, I'm thinking I'm going to move it too. There's quite a bit of stuff that's getting moved this fall once it cools down where I can. This is probably going to be one of them because it's spreading. This is the kind that, I started it from seed, so you can see it's kind of spreading out everywhere. And I wouldn't mind that if it was in an area where it can spread. This is not an area where I want it to be spreading that way. So it's probably getting moved. These are drift roses. This is the coral color one. It's very pretty. It's needing to be deadheaded right now because it's just went out of blooming again, and so if I cut it back, it will bloom again, most likely, at least one more time before we have our first frost. And you can see right here, I had foxglove planted over closer to the walkway, and it self-seeded. It's a white one, and so I'll get to enjoy the blooms off of these next year. I actually have a couple more closer to the walkway, and then I even have one out close to the pool deck. I don't know how that happened. Must have been a bird. But foxglove is another good one if you want, to plant something that will come back and, you know, spread around a little bit in your garden. Uh, and this is another top of drift rose. This one's not quite as big as those. This one was planted, I think, early this spring or last fall. I can't remember which one, but it's very pretty. It's kind of a peachy, orangey color, but, you know, more pastel. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave this one here this year and see what it does next year, but I'm thinking that it's not getting enough sun. I think the crepe myrtle that it's planted beside of is blocking more sun than it needs for it to be blocked, because I think this one should be probably twice as big as it is now. But I'm going to give it one more growing season and see what happens. And then it could very well get moved next fall. This is a flower bed that I made, I want to say last year, but it could have been the year before. I'm planning to extend it out toward me a little more maybe this fall. But I'm going to have to divide these grasses because the grasses got a lot bigger than what the tags said they were going to. And you can see that I have encore azaleas. I actually have one on each side of these grasses. And the grasses have kept them covered most of the summer. And so I'm going to have to do something about the grasses, because I may end up completely removing these grasses and just putting a perennial grass that's upright, and put these weeping kind in a different area, because my encore azaleas, they bloomed in early spring, but they're supposed to bloom in the summer and then again in the fall. And because they've, you know, been covered all summer pretty much with the grass, it has prevented them from blooming. And this is the front side of this same flower bed. You can see the purslane it is an annual for us, but it does self-seed. I mean, I have purslane come up in the area that we just walked away from, the one I just showed you. There's multiple little places under the chairs and, you know, different areas where it, you know, seeded and it come up, and I could have dug them up and moved them, but I decided not to, and I just left them alone actually. But I think I'm fixing to cut back after all this storms. I'm going to cut back the sedum here, because, and I'm probably, what I cut off, I'm going to propagate. And I'll do a video and show y'all how to do that when I do it, because it's not done good at all this year. We have had a very strange growing season this time. You know, we would either get nonstop rain or nonstop drought. And a lot of the plants have not liked that. And so I'm probably not going to move the sedum this fall. I'm probably just going to cut it all back and propagate the cuttings, and then leave the roots that are in the ground. And I'll see next year, you know, if we have a better growing season, maybe they'll do great. Last year they were beautiful, you know, the whole growing season. And so I'm going to give it a little time and see if it was just the weather, or if it was, you know, something else going on. But either way, I'm taking cuttings and propagating them. So if something were to happen to these, I will still have, you know, several plants to either replace them or plant somewhere else. And This is the other types of gar, and this is another thing. Last year, this gar was beautiful. And so that's why I think the type of weather we've had this year is really, just affected a lot of the plants. Because you can see this gar is like split in the middle. It's laying over. It needs to be cut back, but it's just now starting to bloom. So I'm not going to cut it back. I'm just going to leave it like it is until after we get our first frost, and then I will cut it all back. And you can see it's nowhere near as tall. It's a shorter variety than what is over there by the arbor. And you can see this is another one of those salvias that I started from seed, like the one I showed you by the tunnel. And this one is bigger, and it is really a lot bushier. I love this salvia, and I will save seed off of it before, we get our first freeze, because this one is, like I said, it's an annual. And I want to save seed. That's what I did last year. I didn't re-buy this seed. I saved seed off of these from last growing season.